Welcome to WW2 Heroic Tales, where true stories of courage, sacrifice, and extraordinary heroism come alive from the darkest days of World War II. Join us as we uncover the untold moments that shaped history. The year is 1943. On the vast, frozen expanse of the Eastern Front, the German war machine is grinding to a halt. The dreams of a swift victory have dissolved into a brutal war of attrition against the Soviet Union. But Hitler's armies face an enemy far more insidious than soldiers and tanks. It is a microscopic killer, carried in the seams of clothing and spread by the filth of the trenches. Epidemic typhus. Transmitted by body lice, the disease sweeps through the German ranks like wildfire. Soldiers, shivering with fever and delirium, succumb in droves. The symptoms are horrific: intense headaches, a crippling rash, and a fever that burns the life from a man's body. For the Wehrmacht and the SS, typhus is not just a medical crisis. It is a strategic catastrophe. It threatens to cripple entire divisions, to break the logistical backbone of the invasion. The Nazi high command in Berlin is desperate. They demand a solution, a miracle weapon to combat this invisible plague. The pressure falls on the SS Hygiene Institute, the medical research arm of Heinrich Himmler's monstrous organization. They need a vaccine, and they need it yesterday. The war effort depends on it. This desperation would lead them to turn to the very people they sought to exterminate. Seeking salvation in the scientific minds they had imprisoned within the barbed wire of their concentration camps. The stage was set for one of the most audacious acts of scientific resistance in history. A battle of wits fought not with bullets, but with beakers and microscopes, deep within the hellscape of Buchenwald. Among the millions captured and brutalized by the Nazi regime were some of Europe's most brilliant minds. Stripped of their names, their homes, and their dignity, they were reduced to numbers tattooed on their arms. Two such men were Dr. Marian Ciepielowski and Dr. Ludwik Fleck. Before the war, they were respected figures in Poland's vibrant scientific community. Ciepielowski was a brilliant doctor, a specialist whose life was dedicated to healing. Fleck was a renowned bacteriologist from Lviv, a pioneer in microbiology and the philosophy of science. They were men of intellect and reason, suddenly thrust into a world of profound irrationality and violence. When the war tore their country apart, their Jewish heritage and Polish nationality made them targets for persecution. They were arrested and deported, their journey ending behind the electrified fences of Buchenwald concentration camp. Here, life was a daily struggle for survival against starvation, disease, and the casual cruelty of the SS guards. The air was thick with the smoke of the crematorium and the stench of death. For intellectuals like Ciepielowski and Fleck, the psychological horror was as potent as the physical deprivation. They were forced to witness the systematic destruction of culture, knowledge, and humanity. Their skills, once a source of pride, were now meaningless in a system that valued only brute force. They were just two faces among thousands of emaciated prisoners, their future a terrifying void. But their expertise had not gone unnoticed by their captors. In the twisted logic of the Third Reich, Even an enemy's knowledge could be exploited for the benefit of the master race. An order would soon arrive that would pluck them from the ranks of anonymous prisoners and place them at the center of a high-stakes medical gambit, offering them a chance not just to survive, but to fight back in a way the Nazis could never have imagined. In August of 1943, a new structure took shape within the sprawling misery of Buchenwald. It was designated Block 50. From the outside, it was just another grim wooden barrack, indistinguishable from the hundreds of others that housed the camp's suffering inmates. But inside, it was being transformed into a state-of-the-art laboratory. This was the new typhus research and vaccine production facility, the personal project of SS Hauptsturmführer Dr. Erwin ding-Schuler. Ding-Schuler was an ambitious, ruthless, and deeply insecure Nazi doctor. He was under immense pressure from his superiors in Berlin to deliver an effective typhus vaccine. His career and perhaps his life depended on the success of Block 50. He needed experts, and he found them among the camp's prisoner population. Dr. Ciepielowski and Dr. Fleck were summoned. They stood before the SS doctor, their striped prisoner uniforms hanging from their skeletal frames, facing a terrible choice. Ding-Schuler laid out the mission. They would lead a team of prisoner scientists to produce a typhus vaccine for the German military. The ultimatum was clear. Cooperation meant a slim chance of survival, slightly better rations, and a reprieve from the back-breaking labor that killed so many. Refusal meant a bullet or a noose or a transfer to an extermination camp. It was a devil's bargain. To agree was to aid the enemy, to help protect the very soldiers who were perpetuating this genocide. But to refuse was certain death, not just for them, but likely for the other prisoner scientists selected for the task. In that moment of intense pressure, standing in the shadow of the SS, Ciepielowski made a decision. He would accept. He would work for the Nazis. But as he looked at the gleaming new laboratory equipment, a plan began to form in his mind, a plan of breathtaking audacity. He would not be a cog in their machine of death. He would become a saboteur, using the very tools the Nazis gave him to undermine them from within. The work inside Block 50 began under the ever-watchful eyes of SS guards. The prisoner scientists, led by Dr. Ciepielowski, were a small, clandestine brotherhood bound by a shared secret. They knew that a single misplaced word or suspicious action could lead to their immediate execution. Communication was a ballet of whispered conversations in Polish, subtle gestures, and coded notes passed on scraps of paper. The plan Ciepielowski devised was as brilliant as it was dangerous. They would operate two secret production lines. One would produce the vaccine the Germans demanded. The other would produce something else entirely. The primary task was deception. For the SS, they needed to create a convincing placebo. It had to look authentic, with the correct color and turbidity. It had to pass basic chemical inspections. The team formulated a mixture of harmless substances, likely a simple saline solution with a small amount of protein, perhaps egg albumin, to mimic the cloudiness of a genuine vaccine culture. Each vial was meticulously prepared, sealed, and labeled according to strict German military protocol. Thousands of these fake doses were produced, carefully logged, and handed over to the SS for shipment to the Eastern Front. This required an immense collective effort, a conspiracy of silence among the prisoner scientists. Any one of them could have betrayed the operation for an extra ration of bread. None did. Simultaneously, and in absolute secrecy, Ciepielowski's team worked on the real vaccine. Using smuggled materials and carefully diverted resources, they cultivated live typhus pathogens. This was incredibly dangerous work, conducted with makeshift equipment and the constant risk of infection. The resulting vaccine was a precious, life-saving fluid. This was their true mission, to create a weapon of hope for their fellow inmates, who were dying in droves from typhus outbreaks sweeping through the overcrowded, unsanitary barracks. The deception had begun. 2 sets of books were kept, 2 production lines were run, and 2 vastly different outcomes were intended. One of death and defeat for their enemies, and one of life and resistance for their friends. Producing a fake vaccine was one thing. Convincing the meticulous and deeply suspicious SS medical officers of its legitimacy was another. Dr. Ding-Schuler was no fool. He demanded constant proof, regular reports, and scientific demonstrations of the vaccine's efficacy. This is where the intellectual battle truly began, a contest of scientific wits where Dr. Ciepielowski's deep knowledge became his greatest weapon. He couldn't just present a vial of cloudy water. He had to build a fortress of fabricated data around it. The team engaged in sophisticated scientific trickery. When SS doctors demanded to see microscope slides of the vaccine culture, the prisoners would prepare 2 sets. 1. A genuine slide showing the Rickettsia prauseicae bacteria that causes typhus would be shown for a moment before being deftly swapped with a blank or fake slide through sleight of hand. They manipulated laboratory tests designed to detect an immune response. For example, when testing the vaccine's effectiveness on blood samples, they would use pre-treated samples. A sample from a typhus survivor, already containing antibodies, would be secretly substituted for a test sample, thus proving the vaccine had successfully triggered an immune reaction. Ciepielowski's reports to Ding-Schuler were masterpieces of scientific obfuscation. They were filled with complex jargon, dense data tables, and plausible explanations for any minor inconsistencies. He might blame a batch's supposed weakness on a slight temperature variation in the incubator or a subtly contaminated nutrient broth, factors that were believable in a wartime setting. The Polish doctor had to perform a constant, nerve-wracking tightrope walk. He had to show enough progress to keep Ding-Schuler satisfied and the project funded, but never actually deliver a working product. He became an actor, playing the part of the diligent scientist, feigning excitement over fabricated breakthroughs and concern over manufactured setbacks. It was a game of intellectual chess against a ruthless opponent, where a single mistake meant checkmate for him and his entire team. For well over a year, the double game inside Block 50 continued. It was a clandestine operation running in parallel worlds. In one world, there was the official production for the Third Reich. Day after day, the prisoner scientists would fill, seal, and crate thousands of vials of their useless placebo. They watched as these crates were loaded onto trucks, destined for SS divisions and Wehrmacht units fighting and dying on the Eastern Front. Every crate shipped out was a silent act of sabotage, a blow against the Nazi war machine delivered from the most unlikely of places. Each vial sent east represented a German soldier who would remain vulnerable to the typhus epidemic. But the other world, the secret world, was where their true work lay. In hidden corners of the lab, during stolen moments when the guards were distracted, they nurtured their small, precious batches of the real vaccine. This was their act of preservation, their defiance of the Nazis' genocidal logic. The distribution of the real vaccine was as dangerous as its creation. An informal, covert network of trusted prisoners was established. Doctors working in the squalid prisoner infirmary, known as the Revier, were key conspirators. The vaccine vials were smuggled out of Block 50 in the most ingenious ways. They were hidden inside hollowed-out loaves of bread, concealed in the false bottoms of soup buckets, or passed hand-to-hand in the chaotic crush of morning roll call. Each dose administered was a small miracle. A prisoner shivering with the first signs of typhus would be secretly inoculated, giving them a fighting chance at survival. In a place designed for death, Ciepielowski and his team were sowing seeds of life. They were reclaiming their identities as healers, using their knowledge not for their captors' benefit, but for the salvation of their community. It was the ultimate act of resistance, turning an SS laboratory into a clandestine lifeline for the condemned. As the months wore on, troubling reports began trickling back to Buchenwald from the front lines. The much-vaunted vaccine from Block 50 was failing. Entire SS units that had been inoculated were being decimated by typhus. The rate of infection showed no decline. The placebo was having its intended effect, none at all. Inside Buchenwald, the pressure on Dr. Ding-Schuler intensified. His superiors in Berlin were demanding answers. Why wasn't the vaccine working? Had he been misled? His ambitious project was turning into a catastrophic failure, and he needed someone to blame. Ding-Schuler stormed into Block 50, his fury palpable. He confronted Ciepielowski and his team, accusing them of incompetence and sabotage. Threats of torture and execution filled the sterile air of the laboratory. The prisoner scientists stood their ground, their faces impassive masks hiding their terror. Ciepielowski, with ice-cold calm, deployed his final line of defense. He and his team had prepared for this moment. They presented a barrage of plausible excuses. Perhaps it was a new, more virulent strain of typhus emerging on the front, one their vaccine wasn't designed for. Perhaps the vaccine was being improperly stored or administered in the chaotic field conditions. They produced reams of their fabricated data, pointing to successful lab trials within the camp to prove their methods were sound. Their arguments were so scientifically coherent that they planted a seed of doubt. But Ding-Schuler was trapped. He had staked his reputation on this project. To admit to Berlin that he had failed or that his prisoners had outsmarted him would be professional suicide. And so, in a moment of supreme irony, the Nazi doctor became an unwilling accomplice in the deception. To save his own skin, he began to falsify his own reports to his superiors. He claimed the vaccine was a resounding success, inventing statistics and fabricating success stories. The saboteur and his target were now both engaged in the same lie, each for their own reasons. The deception had come full circle. On April 11, 1945, the sounds of approaching American artillery echoed across the hills surrounding Buchenwald. The SS guards began to flee. In a final, desperate act of defiance, the camp's prisoner resistance rose up, seizing control just hours before the U.S. Army arrived. The gates of hell were finally thrown open. For Dr. Ciepielowski, Dr. Fleck, and the other scientists of Block 50, liberation was a bewildering moment of relief mixed with profound exhaustion. They had survived. As the camp's horrors were documented by the Allies, the full story of their incredible sabotage slowly came to light. The consequences of their actions were twofold and immense. First and most importantly was the human impact inside the camp. While exact numbers are impossible to verify, it is certain that the secret supply of real vaccine saved countless prisoner lives. In an environment where typhus outbreaks were a constant threat, their clandestine inoculations helped protect key members of the camp resistance and gave hope and a chance of survival to many who would have otherwise perished. They had used their captors' resources to save their own people. Second, their actions had a direct impact on the German war effort. By supplying the SS with a useless vaccine, they ensured that German troops on the Eastern Front remained highly vulnerable to typhus. While it may not have changed the ultimate outcome of the war, this medical sabotage undoubtedly contributed to the degradation of German military effectiveness. It caused disruption, cost resources, and led to the loss of trained soldiers to a preventable disease. This was a unique form of warfare. It was not fought with explosives but with intellect. It was not a battle for territory, but a battle for truth within a regime built on lies. The resistance of Block 50 was a powerful demonstration that, even in the most oppressive circumstances, courage and ingenuity could be wielded as potent weapons against tyranny. The price of this victory of the mind was paid in scars on the soul. The daily psychological toll on the scientists in Block 50 is difficult to fathom. For over a year, they lived with a sword hanging over their heads. Every moment of every day was filled with the gnawing fear of discovery. A careless word, a dropped vial, a suspicious guard, any tiny mistake could unravel their entire operation and condemn them all to a brutal death. They worked surrounded by the apparatus of Nazi medical terror. Buchenwald was a site of horrific human experimentation, and though their own work was a form of resistance, they were still enmeshed in that monstrous system. They saw other prisoners marched off to be used as human guinea pigs, infected with diseases or subjected to unspeakable procedures. The moral ambiguity of their position must have been a heavy burden. To save lives, they had to pretend to serve murderers. They had to wear the mask of cooperation, smiling and nodding to men like ding-schuler while secretly working to destroy his efforts. This constant duplicity, this life lived on a knife's edge, exacted a tremendous cost. Survivors of such trauma often speak of the lingering ghosts of their experience, the nightmares that never fade. Furthermore, they bore the weight of responsibility for the lives they were trying to save. Every decision was life or death. Who should receive the limited doses of real vaccine? How could they distribute it without being caught? The stress was relentless. While their actions were heroic, they were not performed by supermen, but by ordinary human beings pushed to extraordinary limits. They were doctors and scientists who had been forced to become conspirators and saboteurs in a fight for their own survival and the survival of their people. The human cost of their resistance was invisible but profound, a testament to the deep wounds inflicted by a regime that sought to corrupt not only the body, but the spirit itself. In the grand chronicles of World War II, the story of the Buchenwald vaccine sabotage often remains a footnote. It lacks the visceral drama of a battlefield charge or a bombing raid. Yet it stands as one of the most effective, sophisticated, and least known acts of resistance of the entire war. Dr. Marian Ciepielowski, Dr. Ludwik Fleck, and their team are unsung heroes, warriors who fought with pipettes instead of rifles. Their legacy is a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of knowledge. They demonstrated that resistance can take many forms. It doesn't always require weapons. Sometimes its most potent tools are intellect, courage, and a refusal to be dehumanized. In the heart of a system designed to strip them of their identity and reduce them to numbers, they defiantly asserted their roles as healers and scientists. They upheld the core tenet of medicine, to preserve life, in a place devoted entirely to death. Their story challenges our perception of heroism. It shows that courage can be quiet, resistance can be clandestine, and a laboratory can become a battlefield. After the war, Dr. Fleck would go on to become an influential philosopher of science, his experiences undoubtedly shaping his views on the nature of truth and scientific communities. Dr. Ciepielowski returned to Poland, a hero whose story was not widely told but whose actions saved an untold number of his countrymen. The tale of Block 50 is more than just a historical event. It is an enduring lesson. It reminds us that even in the deepest darkness, the light of human decency and ingenuity can never be fully extinguished. These men did not just fool the Nazis. They affirmed the value of every single life they fought to save, turning the science of death back on itself to create a legacy of life. Thank you for joining WW2 Heroic Tales. Through the stories of brave souls from World War II, we honor their memory and keep their legacy alive for history and generations to come.